Larry Carlton. You logged on to guitar.com. I'm glad to be here with you. I wanted to tell you I have a new album out on Warner Brothers. It's called Fingerprints. I think you'll dig some of it. And thanks for checking it out. Well, I approach this album the same as I've always approached my albums. I write what I like, produce it the way I like it, and hope that you guys and everybody that hear it like it also. But at the request of the head of Warner's, Matt Pearson, I allowed Paul Brown to produce 3 sides. And Paul has major success in this market. And sure enough, the first single was produced by Paul, and I wrote the melody, and it's a hit. So it's the first time I've ever allowed anyone else to actually create a background track for me. And it worked.
How do you normally create your tracks? Do you lay down a cool rhythm or chord progression and then start playing around with melodies? How does that work for you?
Oftentimes I write at the piano, not at the guitar. So I just sit and find the progression I like and hum or whistle the melody and then just lay it into the sequencer and pick up the guitar and play along to it.
After all of the studio work you've done and all the albums you've recorded, does it ever, how do these rhythms and these chord progressions, how do you keep them fresh?
Well, I've always been the kind of musician that takes a lot of time off from the instrument. And when I say a lot of time off, it can be anywhere from a month to up to 3 months that I don't even touch the guitar during the year. So when I come back, I'm fresh and I'm excited. Hopefully I've forgotten a lot of the things that I've locked myself into. So I've always done that since the early 70s when I toured with the Crusaders. We'd do a month-long tour. I'd come home and take at least 2 weeks off and not think about music at all. So I think that's one thing that works for me.
And then when you come back to it, where do you start again?
I just start trying to find something I like. And I know that my technique will be down, but my heart and my head are fresh. They're clear. So it's just, again, it's finding a groove or finding 2 chords that send you off in a direction.
Were there any 2 chords on this album that really jumped out at you like that?
Yeah, one tune, I think it was the second song I composed on the Fingerprints album. It's called Lazy Susan. I did it at the keyboard, but it went from F minor 7 to B flat major 9. So it's kind of had a little bit of unique sound to it, especially at the keyboard, so that sent me off on a new song.
Now, do you record tracks at home and then start playing around with them? What do you do?
Well, I do pretty extensive demos at the house. So I have pretty much the form of the tune. I usually have the bass lines that I think fit against the melody, but then I like to go in the studio with live players with the information that I've already decided on for myself, and then allow them to expound on that. But from the first run through, it sounds like the demo, which means it has my identity on it.
So I'm sure you lay down keys.
Yeah.
Drum machine.
Drum machine. Yeah, bass part, string parts usually, a little bell part. So when the vibe is there when I go in the studio.
Yeah, and then you try to match that up as close as you can.
Yeah.
Cool. Who did you have play with you on this album?
On the 6 tracks that I produced, it's Abraham Laboriel on bass, Vinny Caliuta on drums, Matt Rawlings on keyboards, and Rick Jackson on keyboards.
Cool.
Yeah, good band.
And who's on tour with you?
On tour, this particular run is Chris Kent on bass. He's played with me and Kirk Whalum for the last 3 years. And Joe Bonadio is playing drums. He tours with Chris Bodie's band. He's out in New York City. And who am I forgetting? Oh, Greg Matheson, the original keyboard player that played on my first Warner's album. I came out to do this 10-day run. I think I've become a more linear player than I was 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I think I have better taste. I think I'm as aggressive, but in a controlled way. Back then, I was a very aggressive player on that first Warner Brothers album, with Room 335 and Pointed Up and all that. I think when you're young, you're more aggressive, and when you're older, it's intense, but maybe with a little more restraint.
What do you mean by more linear? Can you show us any?
Well, yeah, I mean, the guys that all the questions that were asked of me about my playing were, how do I pick those notes way back when? And it was that chord upon chord thing. And for a B flat major 7th chord, I would think of an F triad on top of that B flat chord. So rather than thinking of a B flat major 7th chord. Now my playing, so that's very horizontal thinking, chord upon chord. But nowadays I have more connecting notes, but still have the ability to draw on the chord upon chord if I want to. And I really turned on to the more linear thinking through Terry Trotter, the keyboard player that played with me for so many years, because he's a great bebop player. But I still don't really think scales, it's just that the connecting notes are more there. So that was a combination of playing off the B flat stuff, but also incorporating the F major triad on top of the B flat.
So that little thing that you just did you start in a B flat scale? I know you said you scaled, you know, and really thinking scales.
Right.
You started in a B flat position?
I think I started thinking of an F major chord to a B flat. I think I approached it from the 5. That's an F chord. To me, that's B flat major 9 right there. That's all B flat major 7th. But then I played off of the F triad all over B flat. F triad right there. So bouncing between an F triad and more B flat sound.
Cool. Do you, I don't know where, you know, with all the modes and all the exotic scales,
I don't know
do you mess with all that stuff?
No, couldn't tell you one of them. I did a seminar in Japan this, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, and one of the kids said, how do you use the pentatonic scale? And I said, which one's that? I honestly didn't know if that's the one with the 7th or with the 6th. I don't think of those things.
Did you ever? Was it time?
No. I think what I brought to the table as a player that a lot of guys from my generation didn't start with was a great harmony base. I understand harmony. I can reharmonize and harmonize songs. So I didn't know scales and modes, but I understand harmony.
How did you come to that understanding?
By listening to players, and my approach was to break down their solos, and I always broke it down into chords rather than into scales. Plus, I think my generation, I'm 52 now, I think one benefit I have over some of the younger players today is I learned songs, meaning standards, when I was in my teens. And if you take a standard like Misty, most people have heard the song. Well, I learned 3 different arrangements from 3 different guitar players when I was in my teens. So one guy would play very straight ahead. Another guy would play, and then I heard one other guy play, so I learned all these arrangements by great players when I was in my teens, and that forced me to use my hands and understand harmony.
Did you spend a lot of time then, like all the moving notes that you have, did you just spend time searching those notes out or, on their own, or were you specifically applying them to songs of this?
Well, I would apply it from what I learned from the guy's record, but then obviously once you know how to do that, it shows up in your playing other ways as you're creating your own arrangement for some tunes. What Wes Montgomery brought to the table, besides the sound, was the swing. He would swing so hard during his solos. There are a lot of guys, thousands of them, that are playing octaves all the time now. But they don't swing the way Wes did. So he stands alone because of the groove he did when he had that sound. And Joe Pass, as I go back over and listen to solos of his that I enjoyed as a younger player, he could say so much in 2 choruses. I'm the kind of guy that likes 9 choruses because I'm waiting for something better to happen. And it seemed like Joe could start and finish in 2 choruses, and there was a major guitar statement there.
Did you probably also studied Django, Charlie
Not too
Christian?
much. Not too much, yeah. I didn't own a record and hadn't really heard Django Reinhardt until probably 1974, and I was doing a session for Glenn Campbell, and he's a big Django fan, and he had an extra set that somebody had sent of the collection of Django Reinhardt records that he gave to me. And I listened to them once or twice, but I'm not really influenced by the older guys.
Mm-hmm. It started with like Montgomery and Pass for you?
Yeah, I actually started more with Barney Kessel. You know, he was a real simple player, and I got turned on to him when I was about 13 or so. And I remember one thing that Barney did, they were playing a blues thing in C, and I still use it to this day because I've never heard any other guitar players do it. But the progression is, and Barney played. I learned that 30 years ago, 35 years ago. You know, it stayed in.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you do a lot of finger picking kind of stuff?
I do both. Yeah, when I comp, it's with a pick and fingers, like most guys do. I'm comfortable doing that. I'm not a great country finger picker. Yeah, those guys do that much better than I ever will.
But like this little solo kind of thing,
Yeah,
is actually pick and some
Right.
some top notes.
right. I learned also in my teens some classical pieces, but I always played them better if I could use a pick and one finger rather than the real technique. You know, I learned Richard Pick was a composer, guitar composer that had some books out, and he would write duets for, you know, for two guitars. Well, I learned both parts. So to me, that was a nice challenge back then to try to play both parts at once.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think what I brought to the table as a young studio player was I could read pretty well, but I also sounded young because I was only 22 when I started doing dates. And prior to that, most of the players could read really well, but they were older, so they didn't sound contemporary as I did. So I think people put up with maybe me not being the greatest reader in the world to get that youthful sound. And I had to learn how to play on records. A lot of times going to dates and there was no singer, just the chord chart and the arrangement, but what's the lead guitar supposed to do if you're not hearing the song? And there are tricks. Sixths were real popular in the 70s where you just played because it's non-committal melodically. It's sound but no lines. So there were a lot of things I had to learn. I was uncomfortable when I first started doing dates.
Who were some of the artists that you worked with, or what were some of the dates or recordings that you did that you still kind of are real happy with or proud of?
Ooh. Well, obviously the Joni Mitchell stuff. I think I was at a more mature place by the time we recorded those albums with Joni, 1974, 75, 76. So I think my contribution was pretty good on those.
Which albums?
Well, I did Court and Spark, Hissing the Summer Lawns, Hijera, might be one more with Joni during that period. And in the mid-70s, you know, Steely Dan stuff. There was a maturity I had reached where I was able to make pretty good statements on those records. So I'm pretty proud of those. Yeah.
I'm sure over the years a lot of people have asked you, especially a lot of players have probably asked you about Kid Charlemagne.
They have, man, and it freaked me out because I read the review when the album came out. I read something in Billboard or something talking about this guitar solo on Kid Charlemagne, and I hadn't listened to the album yet. We'd finished it months before, obviously. So I went over with my wife and I said, well, we better listen to this. And we put the record on and listened to the Kid Charlemagne track. And at the end of it, I just looked at her and I said, it just sounds like me. See, as the person who performed it, I'm not able to judge it the way other people are. So I'm thankful everybody thought that was a cool solo. But honestly, it was just another day at the office.
Do you remember it?
I learned it a couple of years ago. I wouldn't remember it today.
Can you show us any little pieces or tips on it, or just even positions that you were in?
Oh man, I don't even remember how it starts, to tell you the truth. But I did learned it a few years ago, and during the show, if somebody would yell it out, I was able to play part of the solo for the audience, but I couldn't play it today.
Was that particular, was Steely Dan stuff any more challenging or any different than any of the other sessions you were doing in those days?
Well, harmonically, it was more sophisticated, which is why I think I was the right player to play on a lot of it, because of my harmony. I knew the harmony. So I didn't just stick with the cliches and then have to gloss over the hot parts where the chords got a little more sophisticated. And I think they recognized that too and thought, those are cool notes. So I think it all got back to me being the right player because of my knowing the harmonies.
In the world I come from, any method was fair.